You are now listening to Protecting Your Nest with board-certified family medicine and obesity medicine specialist Dr. Tony Hampton. For more, visit drtonyhampton.com. Welcome to Protecting Your Nest podcast, and we will continue to walk together as we try to achieve our ideal state of optimal health. And today, I've invited Dr. Richard David Feinman to help us in the space of nutrition. And he's got some expertise in nutrition, metabolism, and of course, carb restriction. And today we then are focusing on the N in our nest, which, as you know, is probably the most important part of the NEST acronym, nutrition. Also, you could argue that the T, which deals with how we think, is also just as important. Let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Feinman. He is a professor of cell biology, biochemistry at the State University of New York. I love New York, by the way. Every time I go there, it's an amazing place. And it's in Brooklyn, New York. And Dr. Feinman's original area of research was in protein chemistry and enzyme mechanism, particularly in blood coagulation and related processes. And he's worked on several scientific areas, and including, believe it or not, animal behavior, and has a previous life in the visual arts, which is quite interesting for a research scientist. His current interest is in nutrition and metabolism, which is why we were interested in talking to him, specifically in diet composition and energy balance. And it's actually amazing that he's in that area. And we really need him in that area because we don't have enough people in that area. So he's also the founder and former co-editor-in-chief. That was from 2004 to 2009 of the journal Nutrition and Metabolism. And Dr. Feinman received his BA from the University of Rochester and holds a PhD in chemistry from the University of Oregon. He definitely is the principal author of the 26-author comprehensive review, Dietary Carbohydrate Restriction as the First Approach in Diabetes Management. We definitely want to ask about that. It's a critical review and evidence-based, and I've always been shocked that carb restriction was not the first approach, so definitely want to dive into that a little bit. And his book, The World Turned Upside Down, The Second Low Carbohydrate Revolution, describes how the science of carbohydrate restriction arising from a collection of diets defeated the powerful low-fat army. And that's really interesting because we still live in a world where low-fat is still considered the standard. So it's very nice to talk to someone who's kind of looked at that and figured out a way to parse through the noise. So I really appreciate you, Dr. Feinman. Welcome to Protecting Your Nest. How are you doing this morning?
Doing fine. Good to be here.
Well, we appreciate you being here, and we want to be as evidence-based as possible, and we don't want to get indoctrinated into any way of thinking. We want to be scientists. So I appreciate that you're bringing some scientific wisdom to the conversation. And I guess a lot of people would want to know what turns your world upside down, because your background is kind of doing a lot of different things. How did you get into this low carb space? And just tell us a little bit about how you got from point A to point B.
Well, part of it is personal. By the way, the book that you mentioned has been is in a second edition called Nutrition in Crisis.
Nice.
And I recommend it to your listeners because I think the publisher is trying to unload it, and you can buy it for $6 or something. I can give you the link.
Yeah, I'll put the link in the show notes. That'll definitely be helpful so let's make sure we can provide
As
that for everybody listening.
I frequently point out that it took me a long time to write, and I forgot a lot of what was in it, and I was reading it recently, and it's pretty good. I recommend.
Right. That's funny. I did the same thing for my book, Fix Your Diet, Fix Your Diabetes. I actually was going to be interviewed about. I hadn't really looked at it in a while. So I actually had to, I actually just listened to my book, which is really interesting, and reminded myself. So I understand how that feels.
So I also don't like it when people say, as I said in my book. So I'm going to say some things that are in the book, and if you heard it twice, well, that's maybe worth hearing twice.
That's right.
Anyway, I got into this. The personal end is I have always been fighting fat. I was, from the old photographs, I was never really fat, but I certainly considered that I was. And as early as age 8, I was going on a diet. And back in those days in Brooklyn, we still had the Brooklyn Dodgers, and I had a Brooklyn Dodgers uniform. And I was trying to fit into my Brooklyn Dodgers uniform so that I would look sharp and impress Barbara Levy, who was, in my view, the most beautiful girl in the world.
All right.
I only recently found out that Barbara Levy is Barbara Boxer, the ex-senator from California. So that's part of my history. I think she married into the Clinton family, but that's the way it goes.
Wow.
Those things.
It's tough
Anyway,
competition.
it's always been a personal thing. I would say that what's interesting is that I always knew that it was carbs that made me fat. So because it's generational, I'm sufficiently old that the low-fat thing was not particularly prevalent when I was a kid. And I did what I recommend to everybody, which is do an experiment. I always like the French word for experiment, expérience. If you look at your experiences, you learn a lot about what makes you fat and what doesn't. So, and you want to trust yourself on things like that. So that was the personal end, and so in some sense, I've been on a diet most of my life. Now, of course, when you're young, you have a lot of choices for diet if you're just watching your weight. But as you get older, you have restricted choices. But I did recognize from the beginning that carbs made me fat. I underestimated the importance of sugar. I still think that we tend to exaggerate sugar compared to starch, but I think it depends on the details. In any case, I got into this in a professional way because I teach biochemistry to medical students, and to give a unifying thing to metabolism, which is very complicated, and students are not totally happy with it. I tried to use low carbohydrate diets as a unifying theme. And then at some point I got into it in terms of research because I heard a seminar. People always talk about a calorie as a calorie. And if you've been fighting fat all your life and you pay attention to your experience, you know that that's not true. That there are things that make you fat, and there are things that make you less fat calorie for calorie. And people always refer to the laws of thermodynamics, which is a very interesting subject for chemists because it's It's an unusual science. It is, of course, about energy and work, and applies directly to things like weight loss. So, and I think what got me into it is hearing a seminar in which the speaker claimed that a calorie is a calorie. It doesn't matter what form the calorie is in. Uh, but and they invoked the laws of thermodynamics, which I knew they didn't understand, and so I tried to straighten out the nutritional world on what the science of thermodynamics actually says. Turned out they weren't all that interested in getting straightened out. Didn't get a good reception. But anyway, that's how I got into it in a professional way.
Yeah, it's pretty sad that scientists are not able to pause when questioned or challenged. And it just blows my mind. And everything we learn in school teaches us to question everything and to challenge. But then when you get into the real world, they say, do as you're told and follow the guidelines and follow the experts who taught you. And I learned as well that a calorie wasn't a calorie, and it may be in a test tube, it is, but I learned when I did my obesity boards that the macronutrient matters. I learned that when I learned the science about microbiome and how you have good and bad bacteria,
That
that matters.
that's not always standard.
Yeah,
Did you?
apparently.
Where did you learn that?
Well, to be honest with you, I learned it in my obesity boards training. Um,
Really?
yeah. I will say this about the Academy of Obesity Medicine: they were as close to what I had learned on my own before I actually got that training. I did my research for Fix Your Diet, Fix Your Diabetes, and when I did that research, it led to, you know, uh, Gary Taubes and Good Calories, Bad Calories, and Nina Teichweiz and The Big Fat Surprise. So I learned from them as well. And what I learned from them was more valuable than what I had learned elsewhere. But then I was pleasantly surprised when the Academy had people who got it
This is
and they talked about,
It's called Academy of Obesity Medicine.
yeah, the American College of Obesity Medicine.
Huh.
And they have an American Board of Obesity Medicine. In fact, if you look at my initials, you'll see ABOM. And I guarantee they only have, this is the problem, doctor, or let me just call you professor.
Call me Richard, actually, I prefer.
Well, I'll go with Richard too. Um, the problem is that, even, you know, there's 3,000 doctors, maybe a little bit over 3,000 docs who are board certified in obesity medicine. But as you could imagine, we have 1 million doctors. So if it surprises you what I'm saying, that there is an entity out there that helps to provide clarity, then most of the doctors never get that information. So they they're not spewing out information that is not as accurate as just looking at the science for what it is. So I definitely want to put them on the map if they need to be put on the map. And I really appreciate you for that. And actually, one of the things that I do want to ask you, when I first got into this low carb space, it was really just to reduce insulin resistance. But then I started thinking about metabolic syndrome and things like that. So from my reading and learning, metabolic disease is really responsible for so many chronic diseases that it probably should be the focus point. So I guess my question is, metabolic dysfunction, your thoughts on how much harm that's caused in the human body.
Well, I think it's part of the answer to your question is what you were saying. It's just underestimated. Its full extent, of course, we don't know yet. Uh, but it's true that we underestimate the importance. And we underestimate the importance of taking a really scientific approach to obesity. I mean, we and I think the way that shows up in practice is that physicians in some way think that a drug is part of science because it's a chemical and it targets particular metabolites. But that's true of diet as well. It's the food you take in are chemicals, and they target the physiology in the same way that a drug does, and frequently in a more reliable way. So I think the part of the answer I can give you is it's underestimated. Where it fits in every place, I think because of that, we don't really know. So
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I agree with you. I think what I don't like about relying only on drugs is that they're so specific in terms of their what they're trying to target, and the downstream effects typically are not taking, it's like you have to wait for those things to happen. Where with food, you kind of have this big bucket of stuff, and it's like a soup, right? And you don't really know what part of the soup is having the impact you want. But what people need to understand is that if you have a soup made of a carrot and onions, I can't tell you if the onion or the carrot did it. But what I may want you to understand is that maybe something in the carrot helps the onion, and something in the onion helps the carrot. And so that's why nutrition tends to be so valuable. And there's just this interconnectedness that is important to understand. And I think if people understand how everything's connected, and how your immune system is a gut issue. Your immune system depends on your gut. It's primarily in the gut. Your emotions, your serotonin hormone is made in your gut primarily. So if your gut is dysfunctional, you may have troubles with your emotions. I think the food is always a good way to start. And I am curious about also, I heard you on an interview talk about your 3-part rule for health. And just hearing you say 3-part rule, to me, sounded like you try to simplify things, right? And I think when you're dealing with medical students and trying to help them see the forest for the trees, you want to keep things simple. So what's your philosophy as it relates to keeping things simple, a 3-part rule, as you may call it?
well, I think the simplest part, which is still underestimated, is the first rule is if you're okay, you're okay. And what I mean by that is that if you are not overweight, if you don't have a health problem, and you get a certain amount of exercise, you're probably eating the right stuff. You may want to find out more about nutrition, but the idea that there was a Garden of Eden diet that we were all on until somebody invented McDonald's, I don't think that's true.
Right.
And it's the idea of individualization is the cop out that health agencies use when you tell them about low carb, but it's a fact. I mean, we don't uh, uh, all respond in the same way. So that's rule one.
Yeah.
Don't assume that you have to have the dietary guidelines from the USDA to know what to eat. The second part of it is if you want to lose weight, don't eat. I said this as a joke at a conference once, but of course that's true. Calories count, and you're going to have to reduce calories, but they're not all the same. And so that rule has 2 parts. If you want to lose weight, don't eat. if you have to eat, don't eat carbs because they're much more unreliable. And in the sense that they control other things. I mean, the essential thing about carbs is they're directly through insulin hormone, and also indirectly through insulin and directly through the carbohydrate metabolites, they affect everything else you eat. So if you, it is true that the fat you eat may appear as body fat, but the amount of carbohydrates is what's going to determine whether they are stored as fat or they're burned as for energy. And the third part is that if you have diabetes or metabolic syndrome, you have to be in a low-carb diet as the first try. You know, there's no guarantee in medicine. There's always a unique problem, but that's what the science points to. Diabetes is essentially a disease of carbohydrate intolerance. You know, it plays out in cardiovascular disease. It plays out in all kinds of global effects, some of them quite catastrophic, but those are still controlled by carbohydrate metabolism. And metabolic syndrome is the clue as to when you're in a normal state, but at risk for disease. And that's why, for example, the USDA guidelines, which are going to come out this year, have totally missed the point. I mean, partly because the dietary guidelines as an idea and in practice is just screwy. But if they truly were interested in how to make Americans healthier, they would look at healthy people, because that's how they're charged. Congress charged them with guidelines for healthy people. On the face of it, it's a little nutty. If you're healthy, maybe you don't need the USDA. But in any case, if you want that, you should identify that part of the population that is at risk. And that's what metabolic syndrome will tell you. And Virta Health, which is a research and a medical organization, they're supporting research by Jeff Volek, Sarah Hallberg, and the most recent stuff shows you that a low-carb diet will attack all of the features of metabolic syndrome. Now, metabolic syndrome is not a disease. What it is it's a collection of markers, being overweight, having high blood pressure, having high blood glucose, and a number of lipid markers. It will correct all of those. And so that's clear. And I think, you know, we, as I said, we don't know everything for everybody, but that's the thing to try first. And I would also say that, you know, if you look at the label of your diabetes medication, it will say when diet and exercise are not enough. Mm-hmm. But they don't really try to play that out to find out if it's enough.
Right.
If they did it right, they might not need the drug. And that's the remarkable thing about low-carb diets for diabetes, is you come off drugs.
Right.
And you know, depending on how severe the diabetes is, you will almost certainly reduce your dosage. But, you know, half of the people in the Virta studies come off insulin altogether.
Yeah,
they're, in some sense, not diabetic.
It's like a miracle.
That's the story. That's what I mean.
And I love your simplicity. First of all, Virta Health, everybody should, I think it's VIRTA. Virta Health. Is that right? So I think everybody should know about them because they are really trying to do their due diligence to create evidence-based medicine, and they do a phenomenal job. I also like the Diet Doctor because they try to be evidence-based in terms of giving information to people. So I would anybody listening, I would really encourage you to learn a little bit about Virta Health and also use Diet Doctor as a great resource, because we want to be scientists. And so it sounds like, just reviewing what you said, if you're okay, you're okay. And if you must be doing something right. And if you're a healthy person at your current state, then you should be comfortable staying in that state. And it's easy for your doctor to measure those metabolic profiles. And if you're trying to lose weight, stop eating. I tend to do intermittent fasting, and I do it because it's a good lifestyle. It makes me feel good, etc. So, and then if you want to, if you're going to eat, try to cut back on the carbs. And I love the last one, which is obviously, if you have metabolic concerns, let's start with a low carb first. And the thing that confuses me, and I'll just say this as a statement, we have very smart people who have taken biochemistry, and it shouldn't take a rocket scientist or a biochemist to know that starchy, sugary foods will turn into glucose. And that's going to lead to the need for insulin. And if you do it in excess, insulin resistance. So it just amazes me that that's not just a simple concept. And I just hope people who hadn't paused and thought about it so simply understand that if you take those things away or reduce them, then you're going to probably be able to fix the problem. So I just appreciate that. One thing that's confused me, though, I wouldn't say confused, but I don't know if you have any comments about this, but sugar is sucrose. And when you look at sucrose, it's made of, fructose and glucose, fructose, fructose, whatever you want to call it. So my question is, if sucrose is made of fructose, and it's also, fructose corn syrup has been demonized, why is it that the glucose doesn't harm as much as the fructose? I mean, it seems like they should be as harmful because they're both, sucrose is made of fructose and glucose. So I'm just curious, is there anything biochemically that I need to know to help me explain? Is it just a concentration issue? Why is it that it's so much more damaging to the body, the fructose?
Well, let me get we agree on the numbers. Sucrose is half glucose, half fructose.
Correct.
High fructose corn syrup is slight excess of fructose compared to glucose. Most fruits, for example, are about half fructose and half glucose too.
Mm-hmm.
So they all come down to the same thing. And as an aside, your liver expects a mixture. So,
okay.
Not to get too far afield, but because fructose does not stimulate insulin, people originally thought that it might be a good sugar for people with diabetes because it would reduce the insulin. But it turned out to be harmful, and it's basically that your liver expects glucose to come in with fructose. So, in fact, if you look at the physiology, fructose actually stimulates glucose uptake into the liver. And in addition, fructose can be turned into glucose. So your question is right. They're not clearly different. What's wrong with high fructose corn syrup is they put it in everything. Julia Child told us salad dressing is not supposed to be sweet. And that's, if you're going to fight with Julia Child, I mean, you can fight with the AME, that's one thing, but you don't fight with Julia Child. So it doesn't belong in salad dressing, and it doesn't belong in all kinds of things. Now, tomatoes are very sweet, so you may have to put a little sugar in your spaghetti sauce. I know that creates a good deal of controversy. But that's the real problem, is that we have too much sugar, and although sugar per se, that is sucrose is going down in consumption, high fructose corn syrup is going up, but they really boil down to the same thing. They are different. If you take a big dose of fructose, it will increase triglycerides right away. But those differences are really small. And I had a long discussion with one of the people who studies fructose, and I would consider him a fructophobe, that is a real advocate against sugar. But I confronted him. I said, if you have diabetes, which is worse, glucose or fructose? He says glucose. So
Wow,
he
interesting.
says that it's true.
That's amazing.
The thing is that if you are sugar intolerant at all, you're best giving it up.
Yeah.
Or avoiding it as much as you can. I mean, it depends who you are. If you have diabetes, you really have to give up most of it. And I find it objectionable how much diabetes organizations and publications are trying to find a way so that you can have a lot of sweets even when you have diabetes.
Yeah.
And, well, actually, what I think about it, there are substitutes, and there's no reason not to go with them if they help. But my attitude is always, I think of my old thesis advisor who said that he would never smoke marijuana because it might lead him to the hard stuff, by which he meant cigarettes. So I think you're best to, go for as little sweet as you can be comfortable with. And artificial sweeteners, the scare stories just don't pan out. They're if you don't like unnatural stuff, if you don't want that in your body, it's one thing. But as a risk to health, it's not real. So
I think, I agree. I think as long as I think if you have a food, Joan Iflin, who was a recent guest, she would argue that the triggers of certain types of food, even if they're made the right way in a low carb fashion, may be too much for some people. However, I do believe that you can do a low carb version of anything. And if you don't have an addictive personality when it comes to processed food addiction, you could probably get away with that. When we have our sweets, we always have a low carb version of it, and they taste delicious. I just don't do a lot of sugar alcohols because of the GI effects, but I do find stevia and monk fruit and some things you can make. Like with the Diet Doctor, they have a low carb chocolate cake, and you really just are looking at eggs, butter, and dark chocolate and vanilla flavor. I can just literally say it off the top of my head because I make it often. There's no sugar other than what's already in the dark chocolate, and it tastes great. Put a little whipped cream on top of that and you're good to go. So I think there's options out there. People just have to find them. And
the best thing, well, see, people don't like the idea of sucralose, which I guess I can understand, but it's not really harmful because it's so sweet that you use. In fact, those packages of sucralose, Splenda, they have some sugar in it because if they didn't have something, you wouldn't be able to see the amount of sucralose.
Okay.
So I think exactly dark chocolate. I recommend Lindt 85% chocolate, and 2 squares of that, and a tablespoon of butter, 30 seconds in the microwave, and I add a little sucralose to that. That is the classic French truffle. Now, people in I don't like to fight with my friends, but people in low carb diets call that fat bombs, which I think is sacrilegious. I object to the term, but that's really a dessert. It is very filling because of all the fat. So you don't want to make too much, or at least you want to eat it very slowly. So yeah, I agree with you. You can do it. The best thing is to deal with your addictive personality. I am not speaking as a Puritan. I'm speaking as a person with an addictive personality. You got to work hard. Just don't.
Yep.
You don't have to give in. And if you give in, forget about it and go on to the next thing.
That's right. Yeah, I think we have to know where we are, and that's why even with Joan Iflin's work, I mean, you can go to her website and just take the little 12 diagnostic criteria, and if you meet the criteria, and you are not able to work with your clinician and or yourself, then you just get help. The help is out there, and again, there are levels to this. If a diabetic's listening and they're curious about, you know, the evidence. I know you did a manifesto that talked about the 12 points of evidence of why everybody who's diabetic should do a low carb diet as a starting point. Is there do you want to comment on some of those evidence points that would
But
add
one of
value?
the things about that is the internet will tell you, will give you the opinion of people who are really trying low carb diets and how they're doing. They may have a tendency to exaggerate how much you should do it, but you can at least get views on their experience. And the advantage to Facebook is they're not embarrassed to tell you what went wrong. And this is a source of patient information that the medical profession is ignoring, because those people are not all lying. They don't have any reason to lie. So you can, and they'll tell you, how to do it. What do you do if you have such and such a poor reaction to, or if you are a person who can't stand broccoli? They'll tell you a workaround. So I recommend that. The real reason for, in terms of science, is the science has all been tested. There's no question that it's the first approach. Again, it's not the only approach, and people say that many people prefer to take a drug because it's simple. You don't have to give up anything and so on. But the truth of the matter is, none of the drugs are as good. I never really questioned this until one of the recent drugs, the so-called Sglt2 inhibitors. Now, the way that works is, your kidney is the way of filtering your blood. And of course, it's a fairly complicated filter because you don't want to filter out stuff that you need. So a normal person will have proteins in their kidney that will take back up the glucose that might be excreted. Now, a person with diabetes may just have too much glucose in their blood so that they can overpower that reuptake. And these drugs inhibit the reuptake, so the glucose is inhibited. And those have serious side effects. And they don't perform as well as a low-carb diet. And if you are on those drugs and you go on a low-carb diet, you don't need the drug anymore. And if you're, here's a piece of advice. If your physician recommends an SGLT inhibitor, ask if they're good. Why is it that a low-carb diet will prevent your needing them? Don't ask your doctor that, but that's the idea. So I can give you a couple of the points on that we brought out. As you mentioned, we had 26 authors, and if you getting agreement from 25 other scientists, peer review is nothing compared to that, I can tell you. I'll just run down a couple of the points. The most salient feature of diabetes is that you have high blood glucose. By itself, it's actually a danger. But if nothing else, it's certainly a sign. And nothing has as great an effect on the decreasing blood glucose as a low-carb diet. And the American Diabetes Association agrees with this. Everybody agrees with that. That's the fact. Now, lowering blood glucose per se may not be the whole story, but that was point one in the paper. And if you look at the epidemic of diabetes and obesity that we had from starting in 1970, and I'm not sure it's significantly trailed off, it's reduced, but the major change in our diet was more carbohydrate. Fat, if anything, went down because total calories went up. It may have stayed the same, but most of the calories increases due to carbohydrate. Protein is a kind of stable part of the diet, and the recent attempt of the medical establishment to say there's something wrong with protein, specifically red meat, it's just not right. It's not really part of the picture. I mean, if you were a vegetarian, if you don't want to eat animals, that's one thing. But in terms of health, there's no risk.
Yeah.
And another thing that is, I find this just so crazy. The medical profession, in recommending diets to people with diabetes, emphasizes weight loss. Now, it will help. There's no question of that. It's a good plan if you can lose weight, but it's not easy to lose weight. And if you go on a low-carb diet, your diabetes will get better even if you don't lose weight.
Yeah.
And, it's not, if you're young and you're male and you're active, it may not be that hard to lose weight, but for most of us, it's pretty hard. So you get the advantage of, improving your diabetes, even if you don't hit it. Even if you shoot for weight loss, there are a lot of ways to go on a weight loss diet. But if you do it by low carb, if you don't hit the weight loss, you'll at least get a benefit. And there's no better way to lose weight.
Yeah.
The other thing.
Yeah, I do not struggle at all. I respectfully say that because I do recognize we have some folk who are, addicted to processed foods. But, the things that I make, last night I just threw some chicken wings in the oven and baked those and had some ghee, just to kind of add a little butter. But, then all you have to do is find a couple of non-starchy sides. I literally just grab.
Well, the thing is that I have pretty much stable weight and have for a long time. But if I notice that I'm gaining weight, I then I'm been on a low carb diet for I don't know 15 years now, on and off my whole life, but consistently 15 years. But sometimes I have more carbs or eat more total. You can't overpower a low carb diet, and so under those conditions, I tend to go more strictly on low carb. And despite the fact that I go around talking about this, I'm amazed at how well it works. I mean, it's I don't know why I'm surprised, but it's very effective. It doesn't, I think it doesn't work for everybody. Some people are resistant to them.
Oh, yeah. Well,
but,
we're different.
People do talk about, how hard it is to do it. And adherence to a low carb diet is better than adherence to other diets, mostly probably because it works. I mean, the most reinforcing thing on a diet is if you see the weight loss. So it has great adherence. But you have to ask. You have to ask what you want. I mean, I can tell you what the motivation is for a lot of people. I mean, weight loss is, unless you're very overweight, it's not really a health to risk. I mean, it's a risk to health. It's except at the extremes, and it's not always doesn't always interfere with your social life, but may. But what the main motivation is psychological. See, I'm not a health provider, but I do interact with people, and there are people who have control of most of their lives. I talk to officers in the military, CEOs of big corporations. They control all aspects of their life except their own weight, and they're very frustrated by that. And a low carbohydrate diet will remove that burden. One of the things about a low carb diet as a recommendation, I'm not a health provider, and I'm not strictly speaking an advocate or anything, but the advantage to a low carb diet is its fail-safe method. You're not going to gain weight. And for people who have a real problem with obesity, every meal is a battle, and that feeling goes away. Even if you don't lose weight as much as some people do, the burden, the psychological burden of fighting fat will go away. And in terms of motivation, though, a friend of mine who's a psychiatrist said a woman came to him and said, "I can't lose weight. I've been every diet. I do everything I possibly can. I can't lose weight." So he said to her, "Well, let me ask you this. If I had kidnapped your son and told you that I was going to kill him if you didn't lose 5 pounds in the next month, what would you do?" She said, "I'd lose 5 pounds in the next month." So, you have to work at fighting it, but it can be done. I think those are the main things about that are in the article.
If somebody wanted to read the full article, how would they get to it?
Yeah, it's free online. If you get to a site where they want to charge you, try to find another site. But it's in the journal called Nutrition, and it's volume 31, and it's the first paper of 2015, page 1.
Gotcha.
And I think I'm going to write a kind of popular version, and I'll let you know as soon as I can get that done.
That's excellent.
Because it's science, but it's not rocket science.
Right.
And again, it comes from experience.
Yeah. I think that my brain tells me that we want to be open to everything, but we do want to follow the science. And if the science points us towards this approach and common sense, I think we should move in that direction. Is there anything a listener should be worried about as it relates to a low carb diet? Things they should be, concerned about, or things they should, if they're this type of person, should avoid it? Anything that raises concerns on your end that a listener should be aware of?
Well, not specifically. There's no inherent health risk unless you have some error in metabolism. But things will change if you change your diet. And, people say that, that they become constipated because they are not eating enough vegetables or stuff. And, you work around that and you pay attention to it. I suspect I didn't particularly have any problems, but some people do. But I think you get problems anytime you change your diet. If you switch to a vegetarian diet, you're going to have problems with that too. So there's nothing inherently wrong with it. It's unlikely that the paleo diet has a certain amount of conjecture with it, but it's for sure that we were not eating the diet that we're eating now, which is not even that some of the stuff we're eating now is so bad, but we just didn't eat that way. We had, a lot of people do very well on a carnivore diet. And the real reason we eat vegetables is they taste good. You don't really need any vegetables. But there's little reason to give them up unless you, the reason for going on a carnivore diet is you feel better. And if you don't feel better, don't do it. In fact, that's generally true of a diet. If it's not working for you, it's not working. And you may seek out the advice of people who have also tried it and dealt with the problems. That's one of the contributions of social media. But it's got to work for you. I think that's very important. You need a lot of information, partly because my colleagues are sometimes dissatisfied when I say I'm not a low-carb advocate. And I'm not an advocate in the sense that it's a complicated system. I'm a chemist, and I might do 10 experiments to prove one point about amino acids, and the idea that I have the whole answer to human nutrition is absurd. I'm an advocate now we're now causing a lot of harm by not focusing on low-carb diets. It's become a scandal. And not to get off the track, but I would say that the fact that people with diabetes have greater risk of dying from COVID-19 if they contract it is very upsetting, because we have ways of controlling diabetes, and that it affects minorities specifically because of that is very objectionable, and it. I know it sounds crazy because diabetes is bad enough. People underestimate how serious diabetes is, and it's because it appears chronically, and your friend with diabetes will seem perfectly normal, and you'll be surprised that he had foot amputated. But that's the kind of disease it is. And, clinicians say it can be like cancer. So I clearly got off the track.
Let me ask you this. I think about.
Was there harm in? No, there's no inherent harm in.
But you said, the nugget.
Pay attention to what you're doing.
Yeah, the nugget that you threw in the mix, though. I've already interviewed Dr. Ken Berry. He's a carnivore. His wife is on the way to being a carnivore as well, as close as she can get to it. I've been on Sean Baker's Meat RX show. I've been on Dr. Black Carnivore. She has a show, and they're all carnivores. That's when you threw that nugget in. I tell people that carbs are not an essential nutrient, but my brain still struggles to wrap around that. But you're saying, as a biochemist, for those who are listening, you just don't have to eat carbs and you'll be fine. Could you just make a couple of more statements about that? Because I think for people listening, that sounds profound.
Yeah, no, I think you have to distinguish between what we know, what is not generally harmful for investigation. What we know is that there is no biological requirement for carbohydrate. You know that yourself, because we don't store that much. In terms of energy, total glycogen in your body it will keep you alive for 2 days. And what that means is that if you needed carbohydrate, if you got stranded in the Andes for 2 weeks, you would die. But that doesn't happen. Your body makes the glucose for your brain, and your fat provides plenty of energy. Even thin people can survive starvation for a long time. So you don't. Now that's different than saying that a carnivore diet is the best. What I can say about a carnivore diet is that the fact that there's no requirement for glucose says that if you respond well to a carnivore diet, you might investigate. We just don't know. We don't have all the biology on carnivore that we have on basic low-carb diets. But see, I used to recommend to people, as my friends, I don't make medical recommendations, but a low-carb diet, you just cut out the obvious, to get started, just cut out the obvious stuff, cut out potatoes, rice, and sweets, and your food is meat and vegetables. But in the back of my mind, I always thought to myself, well, what is it about vegetables? I mean, micronutrients are really micro. You don't need that much vitamins. And besides, Americans don't have a vitamin deficiency. If anything, probably vitamin excess on average. They may be lacking specific vitamins. So what is it about vegetables? And what it is that we're used to eating them. And one reason we're used to eating them is we evolved to eat whatever we could find when we didn't have anything else to eat. So, I mean, the normal human diet has evolved towards adaptability. In times of stress, we can eat any crap. But what changed my mind is listening to Amber O'Hearn, who is an expert on this stuff. And she said that she went on a carnivore diet by accident. She went on a low-carb diet to lose weight. And I gather, I'm not sure this is accurate, that she noticed that she was essentially not eating many vegetables. And that her depression, which she had all of her life. This is not proprietary information. Private information. She says this publicly. Suddenly went away, and so she doesn't eat vegetables at all.
Wow.
I myself find I'm probably marginal carnivore. I'm just on a low-carb diet, and because I'm somewhat older, I eat less, and the combination of low-carb and not eating that much, I don't eat many vegetables. So I'm probably partially carnivore, and I feel better that way. We don't have the science on what that is. On the face of it, there's no reason not to do it. But
that's right.
You have to, and the same with intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting, I think, is the most important principle that we have. But I don't think we have good data on how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the truth is that fasting is not exactly about the food that you take in. It's about what the effect of the food is. And so if you think about food as anabolic hormones, that is insulin and the general effect on your body that increases your body weight, intermittent fasting means that you're allowing your physiology to move forward without going into storage form. Now how long do you have to go without food to do that? Well, if you're thinking insulin, you may not have to go long at all. The advantage to a low-carb diet, in theory, I mean, this is, I've described this theory, is that it reduces the time you spend storing fat, and therefore your physiology switches to something else. That's a theory, that's not real science. So and more is known about fasting than I know. So I don't want to say we don't. We certainly haven't been able to codify it in a good way. But of course, there's, we evolved to, our ancestors did not get 3 squares a day. And that is one of the reasons that a ketogenic diet, for example, is unquestionably not any risk at all, because we lived on ketone bodies. We lived on starvation, because that's how the world was set up.
That's right. And it makes sense. And I just think that I had to pause you just for a second and have you to speak on that, because I just think that I didn't want that nugget to be missed, because you don't have a lot of people out there like Dr. Sean Baker, but even Dr. Sean Baker said his mental health improved. Dr. Ken Berry said his mental health improved. So that's a huge victory for relationships.
Well, for some of us, mental health is beyond the average treatment, but I certainly feel okay on it. Actually, what I feel about a real ketogenic diet is if you're really in ketosis, for me, you feel different, but you feel better. And the way I describe it is, you feel like the average New Yorker who, when they wake up in the morning, if they feel really good, they call a psychiatrist, because it's such a surprise. Gotta see you, doc.
That's hilarious. Wow. Wow. Well, let me ask you a slightly different kind of question related to the benefits of keto. And I we're 2 days after, this is being recorded 2 days after the death of Chadwick Boseman, our superhero, our Black Panther, and when he had colon cancer. So I know that you've looked at some of the impacts of keto on cancer, and I know all the different types of cancers don't respond, but I'm just fascinated by that topic, and I know other people are doing research in that area, and that's an interest of yours. Could you give me your thoughts on, as we honor our Black Panther, your thoughts on keto and cancer and where we are with that research? I know you're doing research in that area.
Well, I think usually my opinion I describe as the glass is more than half full. There's every reason to be optimistic. We have some science supporting the idea. We have some data supporting it. We don't have much. We don't know. We don't know whether they'll. The area that I'm working in is to see if we can get a ketogenic diet to be an adjunct to drug treatment. So we have a lot of cancer drugs. Most of them are terrible in the sense of lifestyle. They're a tremendous burden on the patient in terms of side effects and so on. So the principle that we're working on is that it may be that if you can get a ketogenic diet to be synergistic with the drug, you will need less drugs, fewer side effects, and lower toxicity. And that's our goal. I have to say we don't know the answer yet. We're optimistic because both the science and the limited data that we have is encouraging us to move forward. That's different than saying we've nailed it. Whether there's any cancer that can be cured by diet alone, we don't know either. Most people think it's unlikely. I myself think that it's very possible, but again, we just don't have the data.
Yeah, I think it just makes sense. Like when I did a video yesterday, and it was in honor of our fallen superhero, and I just want to review colon cancer. So in the video, I made it very clear that we don't have the science to say 100%, but if eating this way will reduce obesity, which is a risk factor, that should help. If eating this way reduces diabetes, that should help. So in other words, we don't have the double-blind studies yet, but logic says that if we reduce the risk factors that are risk factors for colon cancer, then it should logically follow. So
Also,
that's that was my angle.
well, let me break in because I think that the uh, common thread that hangs over all this is the role of insulin.
Yeah.
So that the reason
Yeah.
that we can see associations between diabetes and cancer, people with diabetes are at increased risk for various kinds of cancer, is because of insulin. Insulin
Yeah.
is a anabolic hormone. That means it's a building up. It increases storage of fat, increases storage of carbohydrate, stimulates protein synthesis. The defining feature of cancer is things are breaking down. The control system is not running well. And the side issue is that in some sense, the body is doing too well. It's making stuff that are not functional. It's just overproducing things. And that point makes people look at insulin. I would say, again, insofar as I'm an advocate these days, I think we have to stop throwing research money at epidemiology and kindergarten science. I mean, we've just reached a point now where we're supporting a really poor science, and everything else is hurting. And in particular, I would say that the medical establishment is trying to back into low carb. I mean, they now see that it's all wrong, and they are trying to waffle and pretend that they weren't really opposed to low carb, which is good up to a point. You still need the truth, but it's time to stop. I mean, the Harvard School of Public Health is turning out one paper after another, training one fellow after another to say that if you make an association between something that you ate and the disease that you get down the line, that's meaningful. And it is only meaningful if you get a big effect, and they never get a big effect.
That's right.
So in that sense, I'm very much of a low-carb diet advocate. We need to start studying that better.
That's fair.
So,
and I guess
that is the answer to your original question. We need to, there's every reason to pursue cancer research, different than that we really arrived at all, but.
That's perfect. Even in the video, I did reference Dr. Dominic, who's doing research in that space. I did reference, thankfully, I was almost afraid to ask the question because I wasn't sure if I was spot on or off with the video, but I did comment on insulin. I said we have to reduce insulin, and if we reduce, the best way to do that is to not put all the glucose in, the sugar in your body. So I think it kind of hit that angle as well. And I know we're getting towards the end here, and I wanted to ask you my second to last question, and that's just, is there anything else other than diet that you think people should be focused on when it comes to metabolic health? Any areas that are as critical or nearly as critical as diet?
Well, it's interesting because in nutrition, you can only find one thing that everybody agrees on, which is exercise. So,
Yep.
you should get exercise.
Yep.
Now, how much and in what way? That's pretty individual, obviously. I personally, this is, I suppose this is a recommendation in the sense that I'm not saying it's better than anything else, but I do both. Currently, I'm doing CrossFit insofar as I can in lockdown. And I originally did slow burn. And so a combination of those two, slow burn, of course, is this. I studied with Fred Hahn, and you use heavy weights and very slow movements. And CrossFit, of course, is a little bit of everything. And the combination of those two, I think, is very good. But it's who you are and what you're shooting for.
That's right. That makes a lot of sense, and that's actually a perfect segue to the last question, which is, you said it was a personal choice, and what I'm going to ask you is as you reflect on my nest and my rope, and those who listen to me know that the N in the acronym is for nutrition. That includes intermittent fasting. The E is for exercise. The S is for both reducing stress and increasing sleep. The T is for reducing trauma and increasing your thinking in a positive direction. The rope, which you have to use to climb to your nest, is for having relationships that add value. The O is for organisms, avoiding things like COVID-19. The P is for avoiding pollution. And the E is for our emotions and our life experiences. So when you think about your nest and your rope, your personal nest and rope, your journey over the next few years, is there an area in your life that you're personally going to focus on so you can help you achieve your ideal state?
Gee, if I can get any improvement in any one of those, that'd be good.
I know. I know. That's why I think the foundation of our health is grounded in all of those. And by the way, I've mentioned this before, but the functional medicine tree has roots, and the roots of disease includes all the things that's in those acronyms. So I don't disagree with you. I think we all need to look at every aspect and say, can I find an area that I need to focus on? For me, last year, it was, I learned how to be an intermittent faster in 2019. And this year I'm trying to learn a little bit about the stress component, learning how to meditate. I haven't really gotten deep into that yet, but that's my goal before this year is over. And so I'm always trying to optimize myself. And I think it's important that we all think that way. So, but for you, it sounds like you want to work on a lot of those different aspects.
Yeah. I mean, life includes all of those. These days, going after stress may be the most important.
Yeah.
What is to do.
Yeah. Don't disagree. I think stress is huge, and that's exactly why I'm going to do meditation this year. So,
and one thing that helps is having a cat that has very loud purring sounds. Can you hear this?
I didn't, but I didn't. That's interesting, but that helps. You're saying that really helps to soothe your nerves.
Yeah.
That's excellent. Well, the interesting thing is I've never had a cat or a dog. And the irony, although my kids have begged for those for years, I'll probably end up getting a dog once they are out of the house. That's the interesting part. So, and they're near that. They're actually 20 and 22. So those days are near. So, but man, I think we touched on some good stuff. I think for those who are listening, we want to make sure you're aware that we always do a post podcast, Facebook, YouTube Live. We're going to dive into a critical look at the literature, and we're going to have a slideshow presentation that Dr. Feinman has agreed to do. So for those who are listening, please plan to check that out. That'll be in the show notes so that you'll be able to find that in the show notes of this podcast. And any parting comments before I give my parting thoughts, Doctor?
No,
Okay.
I'd go with the 3 rules and
Yep.
with the nest and the rope.
That's right. I love it. That's a you got it. And I will wrap up and thank you for being with us today.
Okay, my pleasure.
And I'll remind people, that the 3-part rule you stated is if you're okay, you're okay. And if you want to lose weight, don't eat. And if you planning to lose weight, just avoid carbs. And of course, if you have diabetes or metabolic disease, you got to go low carb as a first option. So that's a very simple approach. And, we talked about a lot of stuff. It's amazing that things started pretty early for you at the young, tender age of 8 or so. And you recognize I need to do something for this body. And we talked about sugar, fructose, cancer, and all kinds of interesting areas of focus. So I think that I hope that those who are listening got a little bit more meat on the bone as it relates to metabolic disease, insulin resistance, and this idea that maybe carb restriction is something I should put on my to-do list if I haven't tried it. And for some, even go as far as carnivore, which it's nice to hear our scientists say that may not be a bad way to go. So I will wrap up our discussion and prepare for our next part, which is the YouTube live video. And I thank everybody for listening to the podcast today. And as I always tell you, make sure you do your due diligence to protect your personal nest and, of course, the nest of those who you love. Have a great day, guys. You've been listening to Protecting Your Nest with Dr. Tony Hampton. For more, visit drtonyhampton.com.